Hey folks, TJ here. This week's topic is on, internalized transphobia. So I know I'm a couple of days late, but here's my little input into the conversation. I'll be really interested to hear what some other folks will add to. Really appreciated what Zach and Adrian had to say so far. I hadn't really thought about specifically the piece they each touched on about names of trans guys and finding quote-unquote common trans guy names like Caden or whatever, to be annoying, or finding them to be too common, for lack of a better term. So I appreciated that. I hadn't really thought about that as a form of internalized transphobia. And then especially I liked the connection to, that there's a potential reason why so many folks are choosing some of these common names is perhaps as an extension to wanting to connect to community in a way. Which is interesting. Again, not something I had really thought of before. Definitely interesting to keep in mind as more folks might choose those names. In terms of looking at internalized transphobia and my own experience with it, I'm actually going to dip into the past a little bit, way before I myself realized that possibly I might be trans. And that was when I was starting to question my sexuality. I was very much repressing my attraction towards women and all that kind of stuff, because I really felt like an outsider, and definitely got those messages that I wasn't supposed to be attracted to women. So I ended up kind of just holding everything in and having like these internal conversations with myself, of trying to convince myself that that's normal, that that's fine, that I had these attractions and these feelings towards friends of mine that happened to be female. And I remember distinctly once watching television, or I was entering a room while the television was on. Like the details are a little fuzzy. I just remember the TV screen. I remember kind of the setup of the living room, and I don't know exactly what context, if this was a show, it was a news piece, or what, but again, just kind of remembering vividly this image of either drag queens or trans women, especially media during this time. This was like mid 90s, when it came to drawing mirroring distinctions between these terms, and using the terms that the people would prefer, the people that they were talking about specifically would prefer to be used about them. It didn't really happen, so who knows how these folks were being described. But I remember very, very, very distinctly thinking to myself, and this was in connection to my feelings about my sexuality at the time, at least I'm not like them. And that's how, in that moment, I just convinced myself that, and was able to affirm my sexual attractions and my sexual feelings, and all those pieces, and finally came to some sort of like internal peace with how I felt about women. And so it's really interesting that I had to internalize transphobia in order to do so. And that bit of memory came back to me much later, when I did start to question my own gender. I started coming out, and I started having these like conversations with myself about, like, I wonder when I had even heard of the term trans before, if I had, and trying to kind of like dig deep, and that memory just kind of like popped into my head. I think it was like an student organization meeting. We had started a trans group on campus, but it was definitely very, very distinct. Like that phrase in my head was very, very, very distinct. So that's how internalized transphobia really came into play for me. because I don't know that I necessarily had a strong sense of internalized genderism, which I consider to be different, and internalized genderism really being about gender essentialism, right? So believing the hype of what real men or real women are supposed to be like, and do. I very much saw myself as a tomboy, and I believe that I should be able to do all these things that people were saying girls shouldn't be able to do, and yada yada yada. So that was kind of the rhetoric in my head. But then when it came to this piece of transitioning gender, it was just so out of the norm for me conceptually, that I found solace in the fact that I wasn't one of them. So there was a lot of that. Down the line too, some of the internalized transphobia really also came from wanting to stay in a non-privileged space when it came to gender. Being someone who always identified as feminist, and saw men as the problem instead of patriarchy and the system as the problem, I saw the potential for me to transition as inevitably tied to acquiring a whole lot of privilege that I didn't want, and not wanting to admit to it or be part of the problem, so to speak. It really delayed my own acceptance of my transness. I very much stayed in this space of I'm never going to transition, and that's just not for me, and those were the reasons, not because transition wasn't for me. Now I'm in a much healthier place in my life where I still don't believe in the binary. I also don't believe that people don't exist in the binary. I have a much healthier perspective on gender fluidity and gender rigidity. If that is what fits for you, it's what fits for you. And just a much healthier perspective on not necessarily calling things that I do or parts of my body as female or feminine or masculine or male, because those are arbitrary. So I think those are some of the ways that I'm trying to consciously eliminate some of the remnants of internalized transphobia. This stuff I think really stays for a while, because we do live in a society that reinforces it all the time, and continues to hammer it back. So I do think that the process to eliminate whatever internalized isms you carry with you has to be a conscious process, and not just I'm just going to ignore the negative messages coming at me, because we really can't. So that's my piece about internalized transphobia, or at least what I can conjure up today. Hope to hear from some of the other guys too, to talk about this topic. All right, take care.